righteousness shall he judge the poor, and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked, and righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing the book of Colossians. We left off talking the day before yesterday about the wives, submit yourselves to your husbands. We had just started to hit into that, and it's kind of a somewhat of a new subject, but he's giving general instructions. Now, it's considered controversial, and we talked about it a bit already about the wives submit to your husbands. And primarily all I talked about was practical considerations. Of course, the first consideration is always you should do things because it's right in the sight of the Lord. But it's understandable with so much social pressure in the other direction that says, wait a second, there's something wrong with this. But it's really quite ridiculous because, it's like demanding, because as I said, women marry up. They like men and are attracted to men that they feel are their superiors. And in fact, the word submit yourselves is one word in Greek, hupotasso, and it means to place yourself in rank under, to rank yourself under. I mean, like if you have a ship, there's a captain and there's a first mate. It's not just that the first mate has to do what the captain says. Sometimes, like I think I've referred to many times, because the first movie I ever went to with my wife, her parents took us. It was the night I met her parents for the first time. We weren't engaged yet, and they took us to see The Lion King when it was out in the theaters the first time because it was a big phenomenon at the time. And I always refer to that part where the wicked lion Scar says, "I'm the king. That means I can do whatever I want, and you have to do what I say." I forgot the exact linguistics of it there, but that's that sort of primitive mindset of like, that means whatever I say goes. The idea is that we are Christians here pulling together for what's best. That's why the very next thing he follows it up with is, husbands, love your wives. Now, as I said, love is a great responsibility. So much, just like they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions, so much evil comes from people who say that they're acting out of love. Because they won't take responsibility for the consequences of the things they've tried to do out of love. I think a lot in terms of, when I say that, I'm thinking in terms of state action and stuff like that. People try to help people through laws and stuff, and then it ends up hurting people more, but nobody ever goes back and fixes what they did. Because that's very difficult in the system. Because then when you do, they'll say, well, you don't care about the poor? Well, you don't care about the elderly? As soon as you try to fix something that maybe is hurting people, or suggest it, it was just holding my nose so I can pull air in. It's kind of painful this morning. Anyways, husbands need to love their wives. But that doesn't mean, I've said this, imagine yourself, you're on a ship. I've never said it quite this way, of course, but you're on a ship, and the captain's saying, okay, we're going to, all right, men, here's what we're doing, and the first mate stands up and says, hold on a second, like he has some sort of veto power. That's how wives sometimes act towards their husbands. They act as though they have veto power, or they're actually in charge. The thing is, a husband could delegate a lot I just realized my microphone keeps clipping. That might be distorted. A husband... What's going on? Oh, I'm plugged into the wrong one. Hold on, that's going to be too loud. No, that's right. That's the right one. Okay, just a little down. What was I saying? Oh, let me have a sip of coffee. You can delegate quite a bit of authority. I delegate quite a bit to my wife. I don't like ask her to consult me on everything. That's ridiculous. That makes my job difficult. You know what I mean? And it's this tendency to delegate to the second in command who has a lot of responsibility. Hold on. All right, you won't see or hear this. All right, technical interruption there. You know, it is common to delegate authority to second command. Okay, so that. But it can, but they should not get the sense that they do indeed run the show or forget who is ultimately in charge. I think getting too much authority can lead someone to feel like they are in, and it can give you a sort of parochial sense that you have responsibility over everything, which you in part do. And marriage in many ways is a partnership, of course. But there's a senior partner. You know what I mean? I like to think of us, people like to think of it as equals and stuff, but it's like, quite frankly, if you thought of him as your equal, you wouldn't have married him. That's how things are generally go. There's rare instances where nature is defeated in this. The nature of man and woman, it is the nature. It is rare. I mean, where they're going to, Now, over time, women can come to despise their husbands and think that they are beneath them. And maybe over their relationship, they discover that maybe he's less of a man than she hoped for or whatever. I don't know. But the way to healing is not to take further charge and emasculate your husband. That's a good way to destroy your marriage. If a man starts, because the thing is, because I frame this in terms of the woman. It says submit yourself. Because it's kind of your job to submit. I shouldn't have to say, hey, you got to submit to me. If I do, in the past, I've blamed myself if that would be the case. I've never had that problem. But I'm just saying, if I would be unable to make the woman submit, I will look to myself. I mean, not make her submit, but if she does not willingly submit to me, I kind of blame myself. Because I think in some way that authority is not something I should have to demand other people around me give me. Especially in an organic, natural relationship like a family, it should flow naturally to me. And I don't want to say that fliply or too tritely. Like I know it's not always the case. You know what I mean? Like, the husband isn't always such a clear leader. I hate to say it that way, but whatever. Because in my family, I'm very clearly the leader. But loving your wife can mean something when it comes to stepping out of line. Like, let's say the captain, the first mate, like I said in the example, is like questioning the captain in front of the whole crew. And telling him he doesn't know what he's talking about, and blah, blah, and, what does the captain do there? Well, in my opinion, he takes the first mate and has him whipped or something. You know what I mean? At least in the old days. You know what I mean? Because, as I've said when I've talked about the subject, look, if you've got a problem with something your husband wants to do or say or something, that's something that you two should discuss in private, in captain's quarters. Because that's the place where the first mate, who has this long-standing friendship with the captain, can question are you sure, sir? I don't think that's such a good idea. I think you're going to sail us off the end of the world or whatever. I mean, I've got this concern and I'd like to bring it to you. A lot of times in situations, what happens is things are happening live. And there can be a kind of panic because women are emotional and they kind of panic and they think they need to intervene immediately and stop you from doing something and or stop you from making a decision. But it happens in front of all the other subordinates. And you should never do that. You should be patient and wait or say, can we talk privately for a minute? Because the reason you don't is because standing up to your husband in front of your children undermines your own authority. And also, there's just an interesting thing with male-female. And people want to deny nature and the things about us, human beings. But like, a man can be hard, unaffectionate, and generally imperious. And the kids will think it's great as long as he's not too hard, too imperious. You know what I mean? But I mean, generally speaking, a man can get away with a lot more of that, and the children will still respect and obey and all that. With a mother, it's different because there's a different relationship. The mother from the child's infancy is nurturing them, and the women have differing natures. There's a spectrum within the female gender of some are very nurturing, some are less nurturing. Excuse me. But a man will be forgiven by his children for being less nurturing than a mother will. If a mother she starts acting like a man, taking charge, and God forbid, her husband begins to cow beneath her imperious actions and stuff, the children will not respect their father and they won't love their mother. Because there's a contradiction between the nurturing of the female and the discipline of a father. And that's why it's a lot easier for a man to discipline children. That's why women often turn to their husbands for discipline. Because the children feel differently about dad. And they need to be able to come to mother for comfort and stuff like that. I always wanted my own children to have, to be able to love their mother. And that may sound strange to some people, but it's not always the case that children love their mother. Because it can be destroyed. I know that from personal experience. So you got to be, well, on the husband's side, loving my wife may mean if she tries to if she steps out of line in front of everybody, I have to intercept that. I mean, I'd have to step in and show that indeed I was still in charge. Now, you don't want to overdo it, but you can just simply say no, and then maybe a look or something. I mean, they don't like the looks. They don't like. I mean, I don't want to whisper say, "Let's talk about this someplace else." You know what I mean? But here's the thing: it's like, they don't like a hard look or a sharp word. But it's like, if you don't, then don't start off in the beginning defying your husband. You know what I mean? If you don't defy your husband, then he won't have to stand up for the husband. You know what I mean? Because in a sense, if you love your wife, you're going to let the children see that, no, father is in charge. Unless they get, and this is what happens, if you step out of line, you will be pushed back into line. And they must be seen to get back into line, into the proper thing. The children's respect of their mother and obedience to her, it depends immensely on her deference to her husband. If you do not respect his authority, they will not respect yours. I mean, if you respect his authority and refer to his authority as being this, it's like exists, it's a thing. Oh, your father, and yes, sir, yes, dear, etc. And then say, oh, can we talk in the bedroom a little later, sweetheart? Oh, sure, honey. It's like, why are you, I don't understand. Now, that's the time to take up, you know what I mean? And look to find agreement. Because, I mean, I consult with, I want my wife to be happy. So I consult with her. Husbands should listen to their wives. Just like a captain ought to listen to his first mate. He's an experienced sailing man, you know. Why wouldn't you listen to him? What do you think? Number one, well, what's your opinion? In the final decision, yes, it has to be left to someone. Someone has to actually be in charge. And there has to be an element of trust. You got to trust that his decision is right. And even if it isn't, that it's right to obey. And that by obeying, it's like things are going to work out less painfully in the Lord, than if you don't. And of course, we always make exceptions. Obviously, you don't have to. Submitting to your husband is assuming we're all trying to move towards the same righteous goal. And it's not like, submit to your husband. We're going to rob a bank or whatever. That's not what it means. But love might involve a husband having to assert himself because she's stepping on a line in the midst of everything. And therefore you have to assert, because it's not just about you. A lot of times it'd be easier to just let someone defy your authority. It takes energy. It takes and also in a sense, by reasserting yourself, you might feel like a bit of a jerk. But it must be done because it's right. You let things get out of order and the family will suffer. I've always kept things in order, and I find that my children are obedient, and I'm just years away from having half of them be adults. I'm just like another year. I'll have 4 children over the age of 18. So I can speak with, I've seen I've got, 30% of the, 3/8 is not 30%. It's going to be like, the 8th is the 166. It'd be like 36% of the results are in. Almost up to 50. 36%. I must have that wrong. 3/8, 4/8. 25. Oh, it'd be maybe like 37.5 actually. 37.5% of the results are in. All right. And 375, of course. 0.3 is 125, 0.25, 0.375, 0.5, 0.675, 0.75, 0.825. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just going through my quarters. I should know the 8th series. It's a very important fractional to decimal conversion. Comes up a lot. So I can testify that when a husband asserts himself and the wife is obedient, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be something that is cared after and nurtured and stuff, your children will grow up loving their mother, respecting their father, and being obedient to both. And one mother doesn't want her children to listen and to do what they're told while they're living under your roof. They should. It's only right. It's your roof. And that doesn't mean you don't teach your kids independence. You teach them something even better than independence. You teach them command and how to lead if you do it right. And it's fit in the Lord, and it's also it's not just it's because, like I say about worship, why does, someone asks, why does God need to be worshipped? I'm like, it's not that God needs to be worshipped, it's that you need to worship God. It's not that I need my wife to submit to me. She needs to submit herself, because it will do the most good for our family in the long run. It creates the best structure for a harmonious relationship at home. The best structure. There has to be, because if you don't have a default setting to where, like, what if we just can't agree? Then someone's view has to prevail. And and if a husband makes a mistake, humble yourself. It doesn't mean you stop being in charge. It's just you made a mistake. And maybe next time you'll give your wife a little more consideration. She knows what she's talking about, And maybe you should acknowledge that. Love them. Don't be bitter against them. If they're right and you're wrong. Or if they, if they have a problem submitting. If it's a struggle for them. For modern women, I have to imagine it'd be quite a struggle. Even for Christian ladies. I've seen it. Lots of nice Christian ladies that have a very... I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say what I was going to say first and not what I was going to say second. I've observed a lot of women who are very disrespectful to their husbands. They talk about them in a way that is just absolutely, I'm like, what a miserable life it must be to be married to someone whose attitude towards you is such disrespect. That would be miserable. And I'm glad to say I'm a very happy man. But I've seen guys and I'm like, how, they I'm gonna say something that's probably gonna be terrible for some, but it's like, you get married to a nice looking young girl and then she turns into this fat little tyrant. Sits on the couch all day, and tyrannizes her husband. Because the thing is, it's like, you aren't worth all that, okay? Little tyrants. And men, shame on you for putting up with it, But that's where bitterness comes from. It's like, because, you can try to heal something that's gone astray. But, if it's going well, there's still reason where you might find to be bitter. Like it's, how dare you question me? It's like, come on. It's like, I know, like, sometimes things happen. People are emotional. I'm not going to say women, because people are. People, it's not just women. Men are emotional too. Sometimes less so, though, right? Not as notably so. Men can be emotional, but also they can have a greater tendency towards stoicism. But, they can get emotional, and then in the midst of a situation, you're deciding something they don't agree with or something, they can, become very difficult. You know what I mean? Even though they know they should obey. Afterwards they may regret it and repent. Don't be bitter at them for in the moment being unable to overcome their emotional response to, like, you say, no, we're not. This is what we're going to do. What, we can't, we have to, blah, 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 blah. A lot of times that's just what happens. They just start, they can't wait. They don't have the patience. They can't say, like, okay. Yes, sweetheart. And then 5 minutes later say, can we talk in private? I almost feel like, as I say that, can we talk in private, the wives, get bitter against their husbands. Or they can, if they, I wanted to do this and you said no and I was submitting myself and, Maybe so. I just don't think that's as realistic, though. Because honestly, every time I ever pulled my authority card, I don't know if I have to ask my wife, was I ever wrong? Was I ever wrong? Because most of the time when I feel like I let my wife have her way, it's because I agreed with her. I was like, yeah, okay, you know. Certainly don't make it so you have to change every decision just to show you're in authority. You know, guys, it's like don't play around with it too much because you can ruin a good relationship by worrying too much about your authority. Should only be concerned when it really gets pushed, and it's because it's bad for the whole family. You know, it's like, and it's when you don't allow her to get away with that, that's also a form of love. But be careful, you know, like don't just use the excuse of tough love to be, just to put it simply, a jerk, you know. Children, obey your parents in all things, and this is well pleasing for this is well pleasing unto the Lord. Children, obey your parents. By you adults being the adults, by creating a clear structure of authority, starting from the top down, husband, wife, the children will see the husband-wife relationship and that there is an inequality. There should be inequality. You know, people are always obsessing with this equality thing. In Christ, there is neither, you know, there's a certain sense that before the law, all men should stand equal. In certain ways, everyone should be equal, right? But not in every way. And nor can everyone be equal in every way. It's a bit of a fantasy. And it's not exactly a desirable one. You know, people don't really think about what it would mean. We're all exactly the same, equal, you know. I mean, I guess they like to think of us all being equal as like we're all billionaire angels. And we're all equal. It's a fantasy, you know, that's where it tends towards. I guess half hour. But if the children see this structure of husband authority, wife submitting, and then the wife puts herself in authority over the children, and the husband backs her up, the children will submit. They're going to say, this is how the world works. This is how my family works. You know? I mean, a man can create authority and fear with violence and stuff like that, but a woman can help her husband immensely by submitting. And by being seen to submit, you can even mock it up. Yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, you have to wait for just opportunities. You can just model this to your children. You know, in simple ways. And in simple ways, it's like my wife frequently fetches me coffee. I don't get touchy about it. Like I said, give me some coffee. You know, it's like that's weird. I think that's weird, but. You know, she offers very often, and I'll say, would you give me some coffee? You know, or whatever, or a sandwich, or whatever. It's like, oh, God forbid. You know, a wife should be seen to serve her husband. But let me tell you, it does your children good when you want them to do chores. To see that you obey your superior. They will obey their superior. You know, they will obey the one who is ordering them. Who's over them. You know, you show proper fear and deference to your husband, he won't have to be fearful. You know what I mean, and they have commented this before. Well, and it goes into fathers provoke not your children to anger. In discipline and stuff. The longer I've been a father, and you know, as you probably know, I have a daughter and 7 sons. And so I've been a father for a while now. For, you know, my oldest is 23. Or 24. What did I say? Wait, no, 23. Okay, 23, yeah. It's 20, doing the math. It's 23, right? And so I've been a father for 23 years. And I can say that, you know, and I have results in. And I can say that as I've been a father for a while, I find that, and maybe it's a byproduct of having such a large family. I think that has something to do with it. But also I think I'm just better at discipline, and so is my wife. Like, she's better at relying on, you know, I mean, I don't know how many times there are occasions where it's like, she'll say, Dad wants you to, she likes to oblige the children to eat. And she'll say, Dad wants you to eat your carrots. It's like, Daddy, tell him to eat his carrots. And I just say, eat your, and it's funny because at this point, I'm not sure I've ever spanked my last child. Except for when he was maybe like 2, like a little thing, little whap. That has not, it's been a couple years. It's been a couple years, my last couple kids. And I think that as I've been a father longer, I noticed there's a lot less punishment I've ever had to mete out as the kid, They seem to learn faster and better. And I do think I'm a better father than I was at the beginning. How could I not be? Because I was still, and when I became a father, I was the age my son is now. My oldest son. I was 23. I was barely done being a child myself. I certainly, at the time I felt very grown up, but by the time I had 30, I realized I had been a child. And by the time I had 40, I realized I had just gotten done growing up at 40. And so I've learned a lot about the discipline of children and gotten proficient at it and efficient at it. I mean, I don't have to use a lot of punishments. I hardly ever punish anybody around here. Ever. Punishment? I don't need to punish anybody. Nobody does anything wrong. They have little tiny squabbles. I expect them to sort it out, but I also like peace in the home. So, anybody raises their voice to the point where I hear it, say, hey, cut it out. And this is all at the low level. It's all at the squabbles are all between kids with 1 digit in their age. You know what I mean? The older kids, never, ever. By the time my kids are teenagers, they get along with each other and with their mother and father. And I also think the fact that I homeschool has a lot to do with that. Because you send kids to school all day, they're being trained in an entirely different environment to exist and survive in a world that's very different from the home environment. You know what I mean? So, not only do you lose out in practicing the home environment and making it what it should be, you miss out on that, but also now they have 2 environments to cope with, which children are not fragile. I mean, they're perfectly able of coping with both. But the pressures at school are very different from the pressures at home. And also because here's the thing, they spend 8 hours a day at school, and let's say 8 hours a day at home, and that's not even the case by the time they're teenagers. They may be out of it, but at home or at play or whatever, under the care of their parents, let's say. And then another 8 sleeping. So with that, those 8 hours you have your kids, how involved are you in their life? A lot of times, not very much, That's why in a lot of families, the dinner is so important, like families eating together on a daily basis. Like when I was growing up, it was mandatory. I mean, you sit down to dinner and no television allowed. And I was forced to converse with my parents, And they were wise in that because I was at school all day. And then I came home and I watched cartoons. And then, what did I have to do with them? Not a whole lot. And if you don't have... If you don't have, this is a funny saying I just thought of. If you don't have enough time to have a good relationship with your kids, if you don't have enough time to make a relationship with your kids, it won't be a good one. I thought that was funny. Like, if you don't have the time to make a relationship, it won't be good. The relationship you end up with won't be a good one. Because that's a lot of times where parenting fails, is parents and children have very little to do with each other, and they have no depth of connection. And the children are left feeling alone in the world, and so they look to their peers for affirmation and for the things a family would give them, and it becomes like a family to them, or at least some sort of poor substitute. It'll never be a family. And now you can see why some kids suffer so much in school and stuff when they have no friends and stuff. It can be If your child has no friends, then the family relationship had better be strong. Hopefully with siblings and stuff. But that's often not the case because of the segregation of the school. You segregate the kids into age groups. It becomes very uncool if your sibling is at the same school. It's like, you generally don't want to have anything to do with your little brother, little sister at school. Well, this goes to the question I always said about why should we worship God? Well, the same way children should obey their parents. Do children obey their parents because their parents are megalomaniacal tyrants? I don't. Here's the thing. I'm not a megalomaniacal tyrant. I hope I pronounced that properly. I've got megamania. I have this sense of like my own. Oh, I got to be great, and it's a mania. I have this obsession with being on top, with obsession with being in control, obsession with making people obey me. That's how they portray God. Everybody's got to worship me. I need it to affirm myself, otherwise I'll feel so small. Nobody worships me. God isn't. That's not the way it is. You know what? I am an easygoing person. The reason I do what I do in my life is because I have a sense of responsibility. Okay? I owe it to my children to be a father. I owe it to my wife to be a husband, to be the person. She was attracted to me. She looked up to me. She thought I was out of her league. You know what I mean? At some point. So I owe it to them to be everything they think I am, or to try to be. But the truth is, for my own sake, I would rather just not. It's a lot of work. I mean, I'm just saying in part, there's a part of me that would just rather like, hey, be easy going. Everybody do what you want to. Just leave me alone. I'm busy. I got my own things to do. I have my own interests. What is my interest in making, making you just listen to me? I don't care. On some level, I don't. There is a level which I don't. And because it's like, I want to let my kids run their own lives. Because I'm not concerned with running their life. That's another thing. You can make your children be discouraged and angry. Because a lot of times parents get it in their head, like certain things. It's like, you're going to go to college. By the time they go to college, they're 18. And going to college means they leave the home. And then once that happens, like when I went to college, I started living my life the way I wanted to live it. Which meant I didn't go to class. I stopped going to class real quick. After the first couple of weeks at college, I decided, you know what? I don't want to go to class. I'm tired of going to classes. I'm tired of school. So I just lived at the university, and I ate at the university, and I existed there, but I did not attend class for months on end. Because I had no interest in that. To the moment I left, I was just doing it in obedience to what I thought my parents wanted. It was really just one parent. Well, they all, and the other went along, but this is the kind of what they wanted. And I'm not saying it's necessarily right, but the point is, like, you can't hold on to them forever. You can't control them forever. And I certainly don't have any pretensions of wanting to run their life. I mean, I have trouble running my own life, let alone trying to manage everyone else's life outside of my control. That seems to me insane. Like, once they leave, that I would still try to take this parochial control over them. It seems wrong. So, I mean, I've always said this, and I should add this. One of the ways you don't discourage your kids is like, you look at just, discipline and order and rules, yes, but don't make so much of it that it grieves them. You got to pick your battles. One of the rules is you don't cross me, don't fight me, etc. And in exchange, I don't ask a lot. You know what I mean? I don't tell them what to do on a day. We have I have a very ideal situation in many ways because, I don't have to put up with a lot of the things other people do. With the school and friends and neighbors. That's why I moved into the country. I wanted to raise my children in an environment where I and my wife would have the most fundamental influence. And it worked out great. At least for our relationships with our kids. We have great relationships. As far as what their lives are going to be after, that's up to them. As long as they live in my house, I don't care how old they are, they will live by my rules, and I will still be in charge. Just because you're an adult, 23, I don't care if you're 40 years old. If you're in my house, you're back under my authority, 100%. You differ nothing from a servant until the time appointed. And then you got to step up into your own life. And that's how I've looked at it. Hold on a second. All right, something disgusting just happened, so just to warn you. All right, so what can discourage a kid is the thought that they're under their parents' control all their youth, and then they're going to get to adulthood, and okay, it's my headphones that are screwing up. I just keep hearing this my audio drop out, and I was watching the meter just to see if it was actually dropping out on the video, but I think Katie would have told me. But the idea that your whole youth, you're under your parents. Do what they say. You gotta do what they say. And then the thought that, and when you're an adult, it's going to continue. With some parents, it's like that. For some families, they continue to exert directional control over their children into their adult life. I mean, dictating to them what direction they're going to go. I don't believe in that. You know what I mean? I'm not God. I don't have a plan, I don't know the plans I have for you to give you a future and a hope and all that. I don't do that. I don't get into that. I look at my kids and I say, I wonder what they're going to do. Because I want them to have that control over their lives. I always used to say to my wife, if they want to go be a fighter pilot or something, I always used to say that example. Not that I'm a big fan of, hey, run off and join the military if you don't know what to do with your life. That's a big decision. You should consider it because occasionally there's war. And you're not your own person if you're in the Army or in any branch of the armed service. I say Army, I usually mean just the military. I have a friend who's a Marine, and I always say Army. He's like, I was in the Marines. I know. I mean the military when I say that. It's not meant as any insult, because I know Marines like to be acknowledged as Marines. And they certainly deserve the acknowledgement. But I used to say that because when I was young, I was discouraged from becoming a pilot, which is what I really wanted to do. And there's a lot of reasons. I'm nearsighted. I'm 6 foot, almost 6. I'm 6'2" and 15/16 of an inch, which is darn near 6'3", but not quite. It's true, I'm not quite that tall, but I'm pretty tall. I know a pilot, a fighter pilot, and he told me, you don't so much as get into a F-16 as you strap one on. That's what he described it as. It's like you wear it. And I probably wouldn't fit in it. But I was told, no, that's not for you. And though I may not want my kids to pursue certain careers or whatever, as far as but a matter of taste or worrying about them or something like that, or thinking that doesn't match up with what I think your skill sets are. On some level, that I give that's theirs as far as I'm concerned. And then maybe this is a personal preference, but like I don't want to discourage them from their hopes and dreams in life by being like, "Oh no, you're going to be a doctor" or something like that, you know. I don't know how many people have gone into professions because their parents, you know, or even college. Oh, you got to go to college and go get a business degree, get something in finance so you can be a banker. Everyone I ever talked to who worked in a bank hated it. Hated it. This one guy, actually, he enjoyed, well, it was better working remotely. You know, that's what he said. He did work for a bank, but he was like a loan underwriter or something like that. Oh gosh, this constant ear thing is driving me nuts. Maybe if I just turn this off. Alright, let's see if that helps. It's only in that one ear, but now I can't hear anything, literally. So, I just have to put this back. These headphones are broken. I'm going to have the good 1/4-inch jack. I have to have both jacks in. It's only supposed to be one, because I broke it early on. It's weird because, oh, sorry. There's like a cycle and it's driving me nuts. It's really annoying. It's hard to explain. It's like going deaf every 10 seconds. Alright, so. Provoke not your children to anger, fathers. Because you're in charge. Mothers can do it too, though, just so you know. Mothers, you can discourage your children greatly. You start acting like a father. You start being imperious. Mothers ought to love, support, nurture their children, encourage them to, pursue their strengths. I mean, obviously, if a kid is like got an IQ of 99 and not very good at their studies, and they say, "I want to be a doctor," you may say, you may like encourage them. It's like, well, that's a lot of school, and you have trouble in school. You may be a vet. I don't know. Can a 99 IQ? I think people. You don't necessarily have to have IQ. You know what I mean? Because I've met people who have who are low IQ, but who are so responsible and like good memories. I mean, you can learn a lot about animal care and stuff. You don't have to be like this super clever person. It's almost like, like even doctoring. It's like they require a lot of school, and that may not be a good idea. But like, there are people who would probably be very effective doctors who just can't pass the schooling requirements. I mean, they might be great, human beings who are compassionate and who could understand the body and great at, like a surgeon, it's about their hands and the steadiness and the, it's not necessarily about remembering the names of every organ of the body, but, but there's a knowledge component that's very important. What I'm saying is not everyone is suited to maybe follow certain dreams. Not everyone's going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a banker, and God forbid everyone should be. But, parents will push their children in a certain direction, and it can crush their lives in many ways. And they can become discouraged. I just noticed my text is too wide. Just a bit. There we go. All right. Husbands, love your wives. Children, obey your parents in all things. This is well-pleasing in the Lord. That's the right thing to do. Children need to obey. Especially when they're young. As you get older, you don't have to obey your parents when you're an adult not living in their home. You don't have to obey them anymore. You should listen to them. They may have something, but once you're supporting yourself and your own person, you no longer have to do what your parents say. But when you live under their roof, you have to abide by their rules, and you do have to do what they say. But parents, be careful, as they become adults, if you have children still at home, obviously you don't want them to be too dependent, you want them to move on. But also, you can discourage them by not treating them like adults. Just like you treat your wife as an adult, or your husband, hopefully. Sometimes relationships are screwed up, and wives and husbands treat their spouses like children. And my wife obeys me, but I don't treat her like a child. God knows maybe I have, and of that I repent. But even so, that's how they get provoked. All right, so let's be discouraged. Servants, obey all things your masters according to the flesh. Oh, slavery. Oh, slavery. The Bible, once again, advocating slavery. That's what I would say it. It gives room for it. Well, because the thing is, the Bible was written in a world over which it is not meant to assert control. Meaning, the Bible as written was not written to assert control over the world. The Old Testament was written to guide Israel, the Jews. It was written as their guide for how their nation should be ordered in the religious context. And there's some sort of, and also there's a sort of a judicial aspect to it. The New Testament is even more disconnected from the state. And therefore, they lived in a world where slavery existed, as it had, for centuries, up until recently, just a little while ago. And actually, in some parts of the world, it still exists in probably some of its most hideous forms because it is kept entirely, or they attempt to keep it very secret. If you think about it, if you had open slave markets, and I'm not advocating this, if you had open slave markets like in America, and there'd be all this reform and the treatment of slaves and all that, right? People would talk about it. They talk about how slaves were mistreated. It'd be this big thing because we'd all say, like, slavery exists. But because we've ended it in our country, at least, we ended the legal practice of slavery. We have slaves in America right now, yes, sir. There are people who are compelled to serve and work and do things that they would rather take their lives in another direction. I'm not saying it's common, but, they always talk about the human trafficking. You gotta be careful of, there's a lot of news sometimes about human trafficking, and a lot of times they just mean prostitution. In fact, they've used the term human trafficking to cover all prostitution. Now, some of that prostitution is going to be involuntary, which is the equivalent of sex slavery. And that is, of course, a terrible evil. And that would be rightly classified as human trafficking. Someone trafficking themselves willingly should go in some other category. It's still a societal evil, and it's still a corruption in our society, but it is not obviously the same. So somebody who's 30 and selling themselves to businessmen or whatever, someone who's like in charge of themselves, a free agent, able to do these things, is not the same as someone who's trapped and being used. Obviously, from the outside, I don't know how you differ. I've never, from the outside, it's like you never see these things. This is a matter mostly dealt with by law enforcement, and of course people who are on the. I say you never see these things because you have to go looking, and people who go looking certainly go finding, because it's certainly a widespread thing that exists in society. But again, it's a lot like a lot of things that it's because it's illegal. It's underground. Like if there, this is gonna sound weird, but whatever. If prostitution, for example, was legal, you would have brothels or whorehouses or whatever you want to call them, and they could be inspected, and people could look, and you could determine people's status, and there could be regulations and stuff, just like with slavery. It was regulated. It was you could pass laws about the fair treatment and stuff. But since it's entirely outlawed, that doesn't mean it stops to exist. That means it just now exists outside the law. So with prostitution outside the law, since the whole institution is hidden, It is easier to hide within that institution even greater abuses, underage people, people being prostituted against their will. Those things become hidden in the overall thing, because the whole thing is hidden. There are no guide rails. There's no legal structure for it to exist in. It's all illegal. And I'm not saying it should be legalized. I'm just saying that is the natural consequence of making things illegal. Well, I mean, there probably should, prostitution in some form probably should be, certainly the prostitutes should not be criminalized. And there's some, I don't know, it's not a problem I've given much thought to as far as that goes, but my libertarian instincts tell me that, in the Bible, I mean, Judah, his daughter-in-law, played the harlot because because of a complicated family situation, and it was, the general fact of it isn't considered to be scandalous as far as like the existence, and whatever. I mean, I'm certainly not in favor of it, but it's unstoppable. It's unstoppable. As long as you have people in this world, lonely men and women who could use money, you will have the forces that drive the existence of things like that. It just happens. So we still have slavery today. We still have people in situations where, even if you're not an actual bondman, I mean, I myself feel like a bondman. Like, this family is a form of bondage to me. I'm willingly bound in it, but it's like, I have to take care of my family. I've got these children. I've got to make money. I've got to look after them. I got to see to it that they're clothed and fed. You know what I mean? I have all this responsibility, and I can't just walk away from it. I mean, I could, but I don't feel like I can. And that's the thing. A lot of times people are let's say they're being held in a form of slavery, whether it be prostitution or some sort of workhouse or whatever. And they could walk away, but they're too scared. So they're technically not being held, but they're sort of being held. You know what I mean? By fear or whatever. There's something holding them back. No legal structure. Obviously, there's no legal structure to hold anyone in bondage in America. Yet people are held because they can't walk away for whatever reason. Like the chains are, the chains are invisible, but they're there. And I have invisible chains. Like I said, the king is servant of all, and wives submit to your husbands, and blah blah. Everyone submit to me, thanks. And now I'm responsible for everything. Every bad decision is my fault because I was the one down at the end. Even if I let my wife make, if I take her advice and we go based on what she says, like we do that, I end up being responsible because I thought in the back of my mind maybe it wasn't such a good idea. But I did it anyways, and now look where we are. Even if they screw up, I screw up. My children get out of line, I'm responsible for it. It's not like this exalted, I'm the king. That means everybody does what I say, and I sit up on top of everything, and everything comes to me on a silver platter. That's not how it works. I get blamed for everything. I'm not the people blame me, but I know in myself the blame resides on me. Because I'm the ultimate authority. I'm the one who says, yeah, it's her idea, but I could have stopped it. As I say, a lot of times when I've been frustrated in certain situations, and I've thought, and even maybe my wife thought it was kind of her fault. But no, it's not. It's mine. It's mine. I can say the buck stops here in the family. That it stops with me. Even in the law, sometimes they think like we should, when kids when kids are truant, we should go after their parents because they know on some level This wouldn't be possible if the parents didn't enable it. A lot of times it's too late because the kid, you got disobedient kids. It's like you can't go after the parents of a 16-year-old that won't go to school. There's no point. It's too late. By the time they're teenage, if you've got a teenager rebelling, it's like, I don't know how you fix that. Like I said a lot, I admire people who would adopt children that aren't theirs or foster children. Now, I have no opportunity to try that out, or I haven't, because I have so many of my own children. I always assume the rules forbade me from fostering and stuff like that. But I know other people who go beyond the legal number. They get waivers. Not legal number, but there's like a rule, like you can only have so many kids in the home and there's got to be so many square feet or something like that. I don't know. But they get waivers and they get more kids. I never even thought of like, I'll look for a loophole. There's always loopholes and exceptions because there's not enough people to take care of these kids. But I mean, I admire that because I wouldn't I like to start from scratch because, like I said, I've always saw discipline as beginning in infancy. So that by the time, like I said, my 5-year-old, he's been 5 all year. I've never laid a finger on this kid. At least the last year or two, I don't think I put a finger on him. And he can be a little whip. He's sharp. He's, I mean, they definitely push up against the boundaries, but they don't push over them, which is fine. I like to let, children should test where the boundaries are. I'm impressed that they're so clever as to not step over them to the degree to where they need to be punished. But maybe that's the wisdom they learn. It's like they learn to go up and push maybe just enough to test the boundary, but without having to incur consequence. Because long ago, before they even formed memories, when they were young, like 1, 2, they learned father must be obeyed. And there you go. Now I'll go back to servants. This is obviously something we don't have much, right? But when you're in your job, it's kind of like maybe like that. It's in our job. We should do what our bosses tell us. According to the flesh, meaning within the context of our job, not to be insubordinate. You know what I mean? If I'm working in a place and surviving off of it, I want to be good at my job. Most people do. Most people like to be good at their job. Well, am I right or am I wrong? I don't know. Do most people like to be good at? I like to be good at my job. I like people who are good at their job. People who take up their job and do a damn good job of it. I don't know how else to put it. You know what I mean? Because some people you get that they hate their job. It's your job though. Just do it. Not with eye service. Eye service means you're not really into it. I was curious about that word. Oh, we're over an hour. Darn. How to get over an hour? Anyways, it's one of those subjects. This is like this study. I'm not. I could go on and on and on about the subject. Well, we got through the family relationship, so that's fine. We'll pick it up with servants. We'll skip out talking about the slavery aspect. We'll just talk about it in terms of eye service, men pleasers, singleness of heart, fearing God. In terms of, we'll talk about in terms of employment and work, I think, because it's like whatever you do, do it heartily unto the Lord. We're out of time, and we'll pick that up, and we'll probably go into chapter 4 also, begin next week. Well, we've covered the family relationships pretty thoroughly. There's so much more that could be said, and I always feel like when I go through these passages at the end, like this sense of I didn't quite get it, and maybe it was boring. I don't know, but we're done with it, and so there we go. Boring, interesting, repetitive, or if there's something new, I hope it gives you some benefit, whatever. All right, thanks for joining this study. We'll see you again next week. Till then.
With righteousness shall he judge the poor and reprove with equity for the meek of the shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his